How you doing? Thanks again for listening to my YouTube channel. As we said every week, we're going to talk about different subjects, right? Many messages, people talking about, hey, we know you're a business expert, have various different businesses, but hey, can you explain to us the difference about sole proprietors, LLCs, corporations, C Corp, S Corp? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. But I figured it's easier to just break it down because we're keeping these videos smaller. So this we're going to talk about strictly about LLCs, okay? Which are LLCs are limited liability companies, okay? And the question I got, like in messages by a couple people, is like, hey, what do you recommend, right? For me. And that's a very trick question, right? Depending on who you talk to, throughout the years, you could talk to many accountants, lawyers, they'll have different recommendations. What I've learned and throughout the years is that it depends. I really need to sit down the person and figure out what they do, and then also other income sources in their plan and what they're going to do, because what might be right for you might be wrong for someone else, right? So you really need to know like your whole situation to be able to give somebody the proper advice, right? So I figured we'll start like this. This week we're going to talk strictly about LLCs, right? So limited liability corporation, okay? Now, when you form an LLC with the state, naturally it's a limited liability company, right? Not a corporation. Now, that's formed with the state, right? And then you also apply for the IRS and you get an EIN. Now, when you receive that EIN, so let's say it's one member, right? So one member with the state, you have an LLC. People are like, hey, I got an LLC. So when you apply with the IRS, you have to specify, what it is. So the LLC is going to be multiple members or one member. So you say one member, boom. So when you say one member and the IRS, when they actually give you an EIN, that letter, if you look at it and it's one member, it's going to say, you're a limited liability company. If you would like in the future to change the way your entity is treated, your entity classification, you can file an 8832. It's in the letter, right? So what does that mean? So that means when you form an LLC, if it's a single person, right, it's going to be a sole member, right? So you have an option, right, of pretty much most of the time, if you didn't apply for entity classification, when you go to a tax place to do your taxes, they do it on a Schedule C, which is similar to like a sole proprietor, but naturally you're going to put the name of the LLC and you're going to put the EIN, right? And then whatever is left, you're going to put the income, you're going to put the expenses, whatever is left in the net income is carried over to your 1040 tax return, right? So it's very similar to like when you do it that way, which most people do it the basic way, is the protection is really limited in a sense of it's connected, right? So you fill out the form, put the name of the LLC, put the EIN, but that information is then carried over to your personal tax return from Schedule C, which is similar to doing taxes like a sole proprietor, right? And why do I say this? Because you're limited, right, in respect to your protection, okay? So limited liability. So with the state, you have a LLC, but for tax purposes, you're doing the LLC, but you're actually filing it as a sole proprietor, right? Most places do that, tax places. As you know, I was president of operations of Liberty Tax, which is thousands of offices. So, I saw many, and a lot of people just learn how to do taxes. So what happens then is that they're not very familiar to educate you, right? The tax load and tax code and law, So what other option do you have? So if you look at that letter and it says you have an limited liability company, you do taxes by this date, or if you want to change the entity, you could file 8832. Now, that 8832, what does that mean? That means you still have an LLC with the state. You have the same EIN, but you file that entity classification change, and you can ask the IRS by filling that paper out, any classification. You can ask the IRS to treat your LLC as a corporation for tax purposes, right? So what does that do? That can protect you and set a little layer of protection, a wall to help you out. Because at the end of the day, we're in business. Business is risk, right? There's risk, there's liabilities. We always want to try to protect ourselves from lawsuits. We want to try to protect ourselves from any wrongdoing. We want to try to protect ourselves from workers, getting injured. So we get workers' compensation insurance. We want to protect ourselves, so we try our best to limit our liability, right, and protect ourselves. Sometimes that's why people choose an LLC. So you can still do that, in reference to the taxes, right? So with the LLC, you have an option of doing your taxes as a Schedule C, right? But under the EIN, you put that information. Or you can also file an 8832 entity classification, ask them to change it as a corporation. And when you send that along with the taxes, when the IRS grants that, then you can do taxes as a C Corp, right? Naturally, if you did just chose to be a corporation, you would do a C Corp, 1120. And then, or if you even took a little further, naturally you could do, C Corp, and then you could apply to also be S Corp as well, right? You don't have to file the proper documentation with that as well. So you have an option, okay? So the option I also recommend to people as well. A lot of times if you're like, hey, I don't know if this is going to be good. I'm in the real estate or I'm in construction. They recommend an LLC. What do you think? And I'm like, okay, if you're going to start, you can start that way if you choose, right? Start small and then see how it goes. And once you find that you're making more money, you can always, file the entity classification change and then have the IRS treat you as a corporation and have this protection. And why? The advantage of that is that the name stays the same of the company that you've been working hard for. Because a lot of times you start a business, you're working hard, you buy cards, you buy t-shirts, you buy all this propaganda to do marketing and advertising. You have the proper licenses that you need, you have the bank account, insurance. So the beautiful thing about 8832, when you apply that and the IRS grants it and you're treated as a corporation for tax purposes, LLC, your EIN doesn't change, the name of your company doesn't change, you don't have to change nothing, just internally with the IRS, and then for tax purposes as well, and actually you're going to file a whole nother form. So, and at that time, if you're making enough money to do that, you can always pay yourself a W-2, right? If you have a corporate, ask it to be treated as a corporation, they grant it. Then you can do yourself a payroll as well, so you'll get a W-2 from your own company, whereas you began as an LLC, okay? So there's a lot of things, like when people just say LLC and that's it. No, it's just a lot of times education, right? So everyone, I always tell you, listen to this video. You can even Google online, put LLCs, and you can see the differences, right? And you're going to see difference in recommendation. A lot of times, because I've dealt with thousands of people, I don't want to say hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands of people throughout the years, and opened thousands of businesses as well. I've had so many people come and like, hey, I want an S Corp. I want to open an S Corp. I want to open a C Corp. I want an LLC. Why? Oh, because my friend recommended it, my cousin recommended it. And a lot of times, they didn't do the research to look and see what's best for their particular industry, first of all, and their business. So it's really doing your homework. So I thank you for listening to this video as well, but I always recommend people do your homework. Even after watching this video, look up and say, hey, differences. And you can research and see the difference in what might work for you. But also pay attention to what I'm telling you. So if you already have an LLC, always keep your EIN letter when you originally get it. When they give you the original letter, if you do it online as well, you can save that. Always save it to your. It's so easy nowadays to save things. Just save a PDF, and you'll see that it says in that letter what I'm telling you, 8832. You can send that to change the entity classification. And once you see that, you know that that's an option. So, because like I said, a lot of people just go to a tax place. Hey, this is what I'm doing, and they're like, okay, because that's the easiest way to do it is as a Schedule C. But not to educate you, because once you're over that $250,000 mark, the more you start making and you're on a different tax bracket, the more chances of an audit are higher, and it's just better to protect yourself. We ultimately, like I said, we want to protect ourselves. That's why you might choose this particular type of entity. So you can still do that. You still have the protection under this LLC. And then also one last thing I didn't mention. So the LLC, this is single members. You can also have LLCs with multiple members. Okay, so if you form the LLC and then you go to get the EIN and you say there's multiple members, because say you have two partners, you can have an operating agreement where you have 2, 3, 4, 5 partners. Now the IRS grants you that, you're going to file a 1065. Okay, a 1065 is a partnership return, and whatever's left over naturally in profit is going to send that to each one of the members and they report that on our taxes. Okay. So, just to recap, we talked about LLC, which is limited liability company, and we talked about if you're a single member LLC, right? You could do taxes, filling out a Schedule C. You could put the name of the LLC, the EIN, and then ultimately that information is then the Schedule C is then converted and carried over, I should say, the net income or loss to your 1040. Okay, that's one way. Or you can file entity classification and you can change it to either a C Corp and then further change to an S Corp if you wish, right? So, it depends what's beneficial for you at the time, depending if you're growing and economically and the company's doing very well. Or if you have multiple members, the LLC is, when you fill out for the EIN, you're going to say multiple members, and they're automatically going to tell you in that letter that you need to file 1065, and it's going to give you the due date for that. Okay? So again, thank you for listening to about LLCs today. Appreciate all the messages, all the love, and the business. We could talk about it all day. Just always remember, don't just take someone's advice like, hey, I should open this business because that's why, or because I did it. Because there's pros and cons to each one, and everybody's situation is different. Okay, you could have a job and you're starting this business on the side, hoping that it goes up. So maybe it's more convenient for you to have an LLC, or maybe it's more convenient for you to have a corporation, a C Corp or S Corp. It depends on your industry, it depends on your life situation at the time, okay? So always seek good, legal counsel, whether it be with your accountant or also with your lawyer if it's in business formation, okay? So thanks again. I love you guys and appreciate all the support.